And the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will begin with public announcements. Are there any public announcements that staff would like to bring before us today? All right, seeing none, are there any public comments on items not on today's agenda? Any public comment on items not on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, and I should just remind folks, if members of the public are out there and want to answer, you can answer questions too. If you want to ask questions, please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you in the order in which you appear. If there is anyone who is on the phone and I'm not seeing anyone out there, please unmute yourself, *6, and just type right in. But seeing no public comment on items not on the agenda, our claims list between May 6th and May 18th. And these are claims or bills paid by the Commissioner's Office and by Missoula County, total $3,940,017.60. We have a few public hearings today, actually 3 in number. And the way we'll work these as usual is we'll begin with a staff report. We'll have an opportunity for the applicant or applicant's representative to say a few words or present. We'll open it up for public comment and close the public hearing and then have some questions from the commission and or deliberations, and then we'll vote. So to begin with, we have Emerald Lakes Estate Phase 2 Final Plat Adjustment. And I'm assuming, since I'm looking at you, Tim, you are going to be presenting the staff report on this.
Yes, I will be presenting today.
Okay.
All right, this is the Emerald Lake Estates Phase 2 Plat Adjustment, and I'm sitting in for Matt Heimel today. This is a project coming from Greg Hamilton and from Professional Consultants Incorporated. Just by way of some geographic introduction, this is the Sealy Swan vicinity with Placid Lake to the west. This is Salmon Lake here. Highway 83 north up to Sealy, Big Sky Lake, and the arrow is pointing at what was formerly known as Tote Road Lake or Emerald Lake. So if we zoom in a little bit, here's what Emerald Lake looks like with Emerald Lake Loop is in that yellow hatch going around the subdivision, and then Woodworth Road is the county road immediately south of the subdivision. So what we're talking about is just 2 lots within Phase 2 of Emerald Lake Estates, Lot 3 and Lot S4, and they have the orange dots on them. And in particular, what we're talking about are no build, no alteration zones, which are shown in this hatch here for Lot 3. And then moving to S4, this hatch here and here. And these no build, no alteration zone areas preclude practical development to some degree of these lots within the subdivision. And the basic issue amounts to the fact that the no build, no alteration zones on the property, at least on these 2 lots, don't reflect current topography, because the actual topography is the result of gravel pit reclamation. So the request is essentially to redraw no build zones on these 2 lots according to current topography, with the ultimate goal of utilizing buildable areas that are currently deemed too steep for either driveway construction to a home site or a home site itself. Sorry, I seem to have frozen for whatever reason on my end. All right, so we reviewed this plat adjustment against the criteria in Chapter 6 of our subdivision regulations, and we found that the request meets those criteria. And this is just a quick overview of the criteria in section 6.7.4. In particular, we felt that this was supportable because topography on the ground is so much different than depicted on the plat, based on the fact that really there was a gravel pit in the 1990s and early 2000s on this property, which has since been reclaimed. And so the topographic reality on the ground is significantly different than depicted on the plat. So we felt it was, this request was consistent with what's required in this section of the regs to allow for changes. We do have a couple of conditions, and one of them is to prepare exhibits showing the current state of affairs, basically the current no build, no alteration zone reality on the ground. Acceptable grades for emergency access need to be shown for driveways that would access home sites. This includes topographic profiles for driveways, as well as delineation of building sites. And driveway access needs to mesh with the basic fire safety requirements that are already recorded in the Emerald Lake Estates covenants. And to conclude, there's your motion for approval of adjustments to these two lots within Phase 2 of Emerald Lake Estates.
Thank you, Tim. Would the applicant or applicant's representative care to speak?
Hello, my name is Ron Ewart with PCI.
Hi, Ron.
And of course, Greg Hamilton is also here. We agree with the staff report and the recommended conditions of approval. Would you like me to run through my PowerPoint real quick?
No.
No? Okay, that's fine.
No,
It was mentioned on Monday. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, go.
Well, it's all out there.
I'll leave it to the chair. I'm sorry. I shook my head up prematurely. Please, chair.
So, Juanita, do you care to see the PowerPoint on this?
No,
Or,
I feel like it's pretty straightforward with what Ron shared earlier and Tim's recap here, so I feel.
I'm satisfied if you.
yeah, unless Ron, you have something that's just going to blow our socks off that we would not want to go home without seeing. I think we're probably good.
Okay, I'll go
Okay.
with that, Dave.
Does Mr. Hamilton have anything he'd like to say?
You're muted.
Greg, it looks like you're unmuted now. Okay, well, try again, Greg. Well, my guess is this may not be as much of a nail biter as folks might have thought it would be. So, any questions from the? Well, let me first open it up. Any public comment on this proposal? Okay, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Questions from the commission? Tim, why don't you cue up that motion again?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a comment that I want it known for the record that we're about to make a decision based on the reality on the ground, not a map that isn't accurate.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, thanks, Juan. I would move that the request to adjust the Emerald Lakes Phase 2 final plat be approved based on the findings of fact in the staff report, subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thanks.
Ron.
It's Ron.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Greg.
And Greg.
Okay, moving on to our second public hearing, which I'll open. This is the Anderson Minor Subdivision. Bailey.
Okay, one second. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Anderson Minor Subdivision request. It is located at 12180 Pulp Mill Road. The applicant is Matthew Anderson, and IMEG is the technical rep for us today. Make sure I click on the right screen. So here's the subject property location. I just throw this in so you can kind of see where we're talking about. Down towards the bottom right corner is the, or at least on mine, I don't know if it's mirrored for you. I should make that point. Is the Y interchange. So this is up off of Highway 10, off of Pulp Mill Road, which is actually a state secondary road. So the existing zoning out here in this area is unzoned. I throw this on just so you can see where the current line of our county zoning kind of ends, is really down there by the Y interchange with I-90 and 93. The existing land use designation is rural, residential, and agriculture in our 2019 land use element. And I have another slide based off of Monday's update that I'll get into a little bit more about the growth policy and things like that. So the proposed is a 2-lot minor subdivision. It is a commercial subdivision is what they're proposing. It's on 6.19 acres, and there is a existing commercial business that's located on the northern portion of the property, or what will become lot A-2 or A2. So as I mentioned, the property in this area is unzoned. There's no zoning out there that regulates permitted conditional uses, commercial, residential, but it is in the rural, residential, and agriculture designation. So the area, it's actually, I threw this on, this is actually, let me put my laser pointer on here. So this, it's actually just right about here, right outside of this kind of yellow blob area, which I took out of the land use element. And these kind of yellow blobs were discussed as potential commercial areas, or the kind of these areas where there's this mixing of uses going on, but it's just outside of it. And so I put in these 3 bullet points are the goals of that designation. But I did talk to Andrew Hagemeyer before he went on vacation about, if there was any history of why this area wasn't included as part of this kind of blob, which if you go back, it actually kind of matches, oops, sorry, too far. It matches kind of this area down here. So this is kind of that area where that it was anticipated or thought about of having more of these commercial mixed use type expansions. And the reason why it wasn't designated as part of that designation, it was rural, residential, agriculture, is because we just don't want to keep allowing sprawl for all intensive purposes, right? We want to keep the uses located higher intensity, more industrial, more commercial uses where we have infrastructure, et cetera, water, sewer, that kind of thing. So that was the intent behind it. However, it is unzoned. So there's nothing that we have that prohibits them from doing any type of commercial development out this far. And the surrounding development is primarily commercial in this area. I know Dan can touch on that a little bit later as well. But there is some residential and some really small scale agriculture, some small kind of nothing too big, but more rural in nature.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was like, Ron's gonna jump in. It's all good. Anyways, so with that said, though, there is a provision in state law does now not allow us to deny a subdivision based solely on non-compliance with the growth policy. So it is a criteria that we look at, but we can't deny a subdivision solely on non-compliance with the land use designation. Just for that out there. So impacts to local services, the primary access for the lots is from an existing private drive that's connected to Pulp Mill Road, which is, as I mentioned, a state secondary highway. There's an existing 40-foot wide private easement that was established with a certificate of survey for the use and benefit of the current parcel. And that easement was actually relocated. It used to be in like the center of the property, and they relocated it to the western boundary where where it's currently shown on the preliminary plat. And that was done prior to submitting the subdivision in February of 2020. Both lots will be served by individual septic systems and wells. There is an existing septic and well that's for the existing business on that northern A2 lot. No parkland dedication is required for minor subdivisions. No pedestrian infrastructure required for minor subdivisions as well. And although it's in the Frenchtown Rural Fire District, the property is under County Fire Inspector review, so Adrian Beck, and they are proposing a water storage system for their fire suppression. So we did notify agencies for comments. Frenchtown Fire and the County Fire commented on the proposed water system, saying it was adequate. That's what they need to show at this time. They will have to develop more going forward towards final plat. Public Works did comment on the certification of the private road that will have to happen. And then MDT had commented that they would need to have their approach permit updated. And the applicant is well aware of all of these things too. We did send out notice to adjacent property owners, and we've had no comments submitted on the project. So staff is recommending approval of the subdivision with the proposed conditions that were included with the staff report. And I have a proposed motion for you if interested. And I know Dan Foltz was going to be on the line if you guys have further questions too.
Thanks, Bailey. Would the applicant or applicant's representative like to speak?
Thanks, Commissioner. Thanks, Bailey. This is Dan Foltz with IMEG, and also here is Paul Forsting with IMEG and Matt Anderson, the property owner and applicant here. Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions. I thought there might have been some confusion in our Monday kind of update meeting about what the commercial business is or the uses here. But Matt owns RML, which is Rocky Mountain Line Layers, right? And he is in the business of directional boring or horizontal drilling for things like utilities, fiber optics, kind of trenchless boring. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. That's the business there. And then the surrounding businesses are actually in kind of the same business and industry.
Bailey, can you go back so we can see the surrounding businesses? Because there's other boring companies, I think, next door, right?
Bailey, do you have a graphic you could show us? I think you'll have to fit. This doesn't help that
Okay.
much.
I mean, no worries.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. I'll pull up the property information system. Hold on a second.
Yeah, that'll help, I think.
Yeah, and your explanation helped too, Bailey. It was just for visual reference.
Give me 1 second here. Of course, it's being really slow. Okay. Okay, so here is, I'll make it a little bigger. So I have the subject property highlighted right now, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can kind of see. So this is the parcel. So this imagery is not accurate or not up to date. So there is a business that's currently out here. And then there's another commercial business here on the front. This is kind of like a junkyard. I don't know if it's a business, but it's definitely that kind of thing. And then I believe there's another commercial business on this parcel as well. That's newer addition. I'm not sure if you guys know more about that, Dan.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, there's a couple buildings on there for commercial business, and I believe, are they also a boring company?
Yeah.
Yep. And then 2 parcels to the west, that is a church, the Outdoorsman's Church, I believe. So I just thought that would give you guys some context of what's in the neighborhood around here and kind of how our proposed plan and subdivision kind of matches that existing use.
Yep. Thank you.
Other than that, I don't really have anything to present. We've reviewed the staff report and the conditions of approval, and they all look great to us. And we appreciate Tim and Bailey's help through this process.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the proposed minor subdivision? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Questions from the commission?
No, I just appreciate what Hagemeyer was saying about sprawl, but this is not leaking out. It's surrounded by this type of commercial activity. So I feel comfortable with
Yeah, I feel like
proving
that.
this.
Once again, the reality on the ground will drive the decision making, similar to the last one.
So I guess I do have some, I think the reality on the ground supports what's being proposed. I do have to wonder whether we missed the mark at all in the land use element, because given the level of commercial development in this area, it does not seem to be aligning real well with the land use designation that we've attributed to it. And I would also say, and if it were not for what we were seeing on the ground, I would want to emphasize that I believe that our growth policy actually does pack a little bit more weight than we sometimes give it credit for. And I've used this example before, and we'll use it again today. Going back a decade or more in time to the Supreme Court case, Heffernan v. Missoula, where the city of Missoula was taken to task for one of their subdivision decisions, and the court, this would be Sonata Park up the Rattlesnake, and the court ruled that there was not substantial compliance with the growth policy, and that was vacated. Again, I think what we're seeing on the ground justifies what we have before us today, but I guess I would like to give some finer grained thought to whether the land use designations really are what they need to be going forward. But in any event, we have a motion before us.
Yeah, well said, Dave. And I motion that the Anderson minor subdivision be approved based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report, and subject to the recommended conditions of the of approval in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our third and final third and final public hearing. This is the CNH subdivision condition amendment proposal. And Bailey, you have the staff report again.
I do. So it's always hard to switch between multiple presentations. So hopefully you guys can see this presentation this time.
Perfect.
Awesome. Yes. Okay, wonderful. So this is the CNH subdivision condition amendment. The property is at 8960 Professional Drive. The applicant is Matthew Kavanaugh, and the technical rep is PCI. Oops, make sure I'm on the right screen. There it goes. So this is the property location. Just to the top of the screen, there is the Y interchange. So you can kind of see where we are, kind of same area, but we're further south on Highway 10 there. And the current zoning is CI1, which is our light industrial, and it's in this area, and it corresponds to the land use designation, which is also industrial center for this area. So the CNH subdivision was a 5-lot minor subdivision on 2.44 acres. It was approved in September of 2018, and then the final plat was recorded in July of 2020. The proposed condition amendment is to number 8 of the subdivision, and that required fire sprinklers within all new buildings for fire protection. So at the time of subdivision, their fire suppression plan, they chose fire sprinklers as part of it. Oh, thank you. So, oh, sorry, I had a small child pop in. Sorry, it's the joys of working from home.
Good for you.
Oh, thanks. So the condition to be amended would allow a water storage system for fire suppression in lieu of sprinklers, but it would only pertain to lots 4 and 5 of the subdivision. So lots 1, 2, and 3 would be proposed to remain for fire sprinklers in all buildings. And there currently is a commercial building that's actually under construction it straddles both lots 4 and 5. And so they did provide water supply calculations, and the proposal would be for a 10-gallon system located along the internal subdivision road or that professional drive.
That was 10,000 gallons?
Yes, 10,000 gallons. And that's from what I understand in the packet and from the Missoula Rural Fire, which Pete is on the line today for questions related to that, but the minimum required is 10,000 gallons. So they actually, I think their calculations require or show that they would need less than that, but that's like the minimum size that they would need to meet fire code. So we did notify agencies for comment on May 7th. That's the process for this. There is no legal or no adjacent property owner notification. It's just agency comment. And we did get a comment back from Missoula Rural Fire that they are in opposition to the request, recommending the use of fire sprinklers remain the requirement for all new buildings within the subdivision. And Pete submitted an additional fact sheet and an email as part of the and that was included as attachments to my staff report and the RCA packet. So we review the request in accordance with the criteria in section 6.7.4. And I've listed out these are all what the proposed changes must be minor in nature, must comply with the regulations. This is everything. And the majority of them, they do not comply with. And a lot of that is based off of the comment we got from Missoula Rural Fire. So things like not reduce protections or safeguards provided by the regulations. Based on the Missoula Rural Fire comment, we do show that the storage would reduce adequate fire protection, and therefore the condition should remain for all buildings. Let's see, I was just trying to hit the highlights of my my request or my review criteria. I can't talk now. Request is not consistent with the findings of fact and conclusions adopted for the subdivision, as the fire suppression state plan states it's for fire sprinklers, which was chosen at that time for the water supply for firefighting. The water supply change may be incremental and lead to requested changes on all of the other lots, because like I said, this is only for lots 4 and 5, not for lots 1, 2, and 3, which are for commercial use as well. No changes have occurred in the area necessitating a firefighting water supply change. So just kind of the highlights of it. So therefore, staff is recommending denial of the request based on the comments from Missoula Rural Fire in opposition, along with the conclusions in my staff report. And so I have a proposed finding. I know John Kellogg from PCI is here. And again, I do have Pete Giordino from Missoula Rural Fire on as well for discussion.
Thanks, Bailey. So would the applicant or applicant's representative like to speak? John?
Thank you for this opportunity, commissioners. To back up a little bit and what brought us to this place, back in January, the applicant ordered a building, a steel structure for this site. And in the big picture, it's a relatively small steel structure. The use that's proposed is largely storage. It's going to be used by the company for the employees to come and go periodically. There's going to be no public, it's not a public commercial building. So with everything taken together, we looked to contact Pete and requested of him the calculation that Bailey mentioned a little while ago, and the calculation that's in our application of the 6,348 gallons of water storage came from the fire marshal. And so based on that, the numbers that he proposed, we designed a buried water storage system that is compliant with NFPA standards. And in fact, within your staff report, you indicate both fire sprinklers and cisterns are acceptable water supply methods per NFPA and Missoula County subdivision regulations. And I'll let Pete respond, but I believe they're in concurrence with that fact that both of these are NFPA standard. The reason that we've got sprinklers as the main source of fire suppression is due to the fact that at the initial review of the subdivision, we did not know for certain all of the types of buildings that were going to be constructed within this subdivision. And there are cases where either a larger structure, a structure of different building materials, or a different use for the structure would precipitate a need for fire sprinklers. In this particular case, it's fairly unique in that the use, the structure size, the structure materials, and the fact that we have an opportunity here within a stone's throw of the fire station to provide adequate fire protection with this method that meets NFPA standards. And so that's why we pursued it to this point. We think it's a reasonable response. Of course, the reason why the applicant wanted to go down this path is that there's a substantial cost difference. We're talking 4 times the cost, probably, potentially over $100,000 for the sprinkler system. And so that's why we're pursuing this from his perspective. Now, I understand economics are not a criteria that you need to consider in your decision, but I think your decision can be based on the fact that this is an NFPA compliant system, that it meets the standards necessary to address fire suppression in this particular case. And so that's why we've presented this request to you today.
Thanks, Mr. Kellogg. Mr. Giardino, would you like to respond to that, providing Missoula Rural's perspective and why sprinklers would be superior in this case to the cistern system?
Yes, thank you for the time this afternoon. So yeah, it's been a process that started late last year, and we are where we are now. Everything that Mr. Kellogg says is absolutely true regarding NFPA standards. I will make one correction. The 10,000 gallon tank is an authority having jurisdictions reduction with the inclusion of an automatic fire alarm system to provide early warning of a potential fire to give the fire department early notice of an incident if it should occur. And so that 10,000 gallon minimum, or the 10,000 gallon cistern, is a reduction from a 30,000 gallon requirement, NFPA requirement. And we allow that reduction with the installation of an automatic approved fire alarm system. And so it is our recommendation at this point to allow the proposed permit to continue with the installation of the 10,000 gallon cistern and fire alarm system. However, I am unfamiliar with your guys' process. However, the other lots, as Bailey mentioned, may fall or could fall under the same concerns going forward. So going forward, we would like to maintain that the sprinkler systems be required for future subdivisions. And the issue that we as a fire department have, or at least I had with this particular project, was the wording in paragraph 8 of the conditions of approval that states, and I'm looking it up right now, failure to install commercial industrial fire sprinklers in any new building may subject the entire subdivision to the cost of installation of a shared water source for firefighting purposes. And please forgive my ignorance, but that implies to me that if a building owner or contractor builds a building without a sprinkler system, they could do that. And then after the fact, just put a tank in the ground and make all the other lot owners share in the cost of installation and maintenance of that system. And so going forward, I would like to see that kind of language removed from conditions of approval. And if it is our recommendation through the scoping process to require sprinkler systems for a subdivision, that's what remains and that's what stays with that subdivision. So with that said, I believe that Mr. Kellogg and his associates have some further work to do regarding the amendment changes for this particular subdivision. But I can, as the fire marshal, deputy fire marshal, having consulted with the rest of our division, go ahead and recommend that provided the building have a NFPA certified fire alarm system, that a 10,000 gallon cistern would suffice for this particular project.
Okay, I think I certainly know I have some follow-up questions on that, but before we do, is there any public comment on this proposal? Any public comment? It sounds like someone was pinging the commissioner right there with some public comment. So see, no, close the public hearing and we'll go to questions, but first I just need some clarification. So this is a little bit different than what Bailey described kicking things off. So it sounds like the rural fire district and UP would be okay with the cistern provided there was a fire alarm system integrated into that. Is that correct? And that would be to say an NFPA approved type system.
That's correct. So the NFPA 1142 spells out specifically water supply for rural fire districts. And in that, based on the volume of the building, they come up with an amount of water that is required for fire protection for that particular building. Given the volume of the building going in at Professional Drive, it would have required a 31,000 gallon water tank. We as a fire district have allowed reductions in the size of that tank, provided the building have an automatic fire alarm system installed to provide early warning, early notification through 911 through the fire district of an incident at that location. So that is the reason for the 10,000 gallon size of cistern that we're recommending or proposing, or that PCI is proposing and we're allowing.
Sure. Juanita or Josh?
Bailey, I need I'm getting kind of lost in like where we're at and how close we are to the fire department, and then which lots don't need the cistern and which lots are under sprinkler. So just so I have, can you give us a visual?
Yep. I'll throw up the property information system again, just so it's easier to see here.
And because I'm looking at stuff that sometimes has buildings on it and doesn't have buildings on it, so I don't really know what the property looks like.
Well, and that I will say that is kind of the hard part of the property information system, is because it's not current so this is the best aerial imagery. It's the clarity one. So this is let me see. So this is lot 5 is here, lot 4 is here. These are the two. And so currently there is a building that's basically kind of straddling this. They got their building permit in December, was when it was approved with the condition of the fire sprinklers. That's how the building permit was approved. And so it's on these ones. So these lots here, 1, 2, and 3, they currently don't have any building permits active on them as of right now. They're vacant. So the Professional Drive, there is a road with a cul-de-sac that actually comes in here. It's paved as all part of the subdivision and everything like that. So it's really just these 2 lots that we're currently talking about, and the one building that's actually on the property.
Okay, thank you. And where's the fire station?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, Pete or John, if you know more.
Yeah, it's less than a mile away. It's less than a mile away.
To the
Maybe 3/4 of a
southeast.
mile.
Okay.
Bailey, or Pete, could you refresh our memories as far as what is the trigger that would, in your mind, really necessitate the fire sprinkler system? So right now you're saying, Pete, that the cistern plus the fire alarm system would be adequate. What's the threshold where even that would not be adequate? Would it be contingent on the use of the building that would then absolutely require a fire sprinkler system as opposed to the cistern, even with an alarm system?
That's a good question. And fire code is very specific, but it's very convoluted on how to come to the conclusion as to whether a building requires a sprinkler system or not. It really does depend on the occupant use, what is actually occurring in that building, the size of the building. In some jurisdictions, it can be distance away from a fire station. So there's a lot of factors that go into the decision as to whether or not a building is fire suppression system, a sprinkler system is required for a particular building. I can tell you that based on current fire code that the Missoula Rural Fire District has adopted, a building of this size and use would not have required a fire sprinkler system had conditions of approval several years prior not required it. And so what, on an individual permit basis, we can determine whether or not a building has a requirement for a sprinkler system. However, oftentimes subdivisions, and when it goes through subdivision reviews, the lot owners or the property owners decide at that time, and through building, through CAPS, through the fire department, decide, let's just sprinkle everything that's going to go in here, and not knowing what's going in there, because it could be 3 to 5 years. I think we're dealing with some subdivisions that are even 10 or 15 years old as far as reviews go for subdivisions. So getting back to your question, if I can remember it correctly, is what is the precipitating factor that requires a building to have a sprinkler system? In a storage facility, a storage building, depending on the type of storage, there's different categories of storage, S1, S2. If it's an S1 storage facility, if it's greater than 12,000 square feet, it's going to require a sprinkler system. If it's less than 12,000, it wouldn't. So this particular building, while it's an office space, I believe it does qualify as an S1. Correct me if I'm wrong, John.
Oh, you're muted, John.
John, you're muted.
I believe you're correct. Yes.
Is there
So-
any?
I apologize. Just to finish real quick. So the way the code is applied is to the largest area of space that the building occupies. So even though there's a small office area or some office area that will be within this building, the larger S1 portion of the building is what we use as a determining factor for sprinklers. And given the size of this particular S1 facility, it would not be required by fire code.
Is there any worry that even though the majority of the intended use right now might be storage in nature, that if that changes at some point, that it would then warrant sprinklers, and then it might cost a whole lot more than $100,000 to retrofit the building, just hypothetically?
That is absolutely true, and there are conditions in the fire code that talk about change of occupancy. So when a building switches from a tire shop to a restaurant, or vice versa, it would bring in fire code based on its occupancy type. And so, yes, going forward, for the future of this particular building, which is outside of my concern, really. Until it comes across my desk as a change of occupancy request through the permitting process, we may require sprinkler systems in that building at such time that the building changes occupancy use.
If I could
Yes.
note, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I could note that I think you commissioners are familiar with the fact that Missoula Water is very near to this property. Very likely in the near future, we'll have fire hydrants available in the vicinity of or in this subdivision. If that's
How
the
close,
case,
John? Or
pardon me?
Where?
I believe the water main is to the north, a few hundred yards. as it follows the railroad track out to the west. I believe in the near future that this area is probably going to come under the water system. If that's the case, providing a sprinkler system to any of the structures in this subdivision will be a simpler process of connecting with the public water system. And so we're at a different level of requirements there, and the cost is reduced accordingly.
So Dave, I have a bunch of questions, but I'll wait. I just wanted to get the queue.
No, I've got a process question here in a little bit as far as possibility of adding in the fire alarm system and what that would look like. But go ahead, Josh.
So thanks, Dave. So John, why lots 4 and 5 and not 1, 2, and 3?
Because we do not know what structures are going on those three lots. We know what's going on 4 and 5 right now. And since that is a specific steel structure of a limited size and use, since we know that, that's why we're proposing the buried storage tank.
It just almost seems counterintuitive to me, but I'm definitely out of my element here. So if one of these two options costs less than the other, why propose the expensive option rather than the lower cost option, when in either case you don't know what the building's going to be for lots 1, 2, and 3. I'm just wondering if when we get to lots 1, 2, or 3, you guys will be back with the same ask.
I can't say there's not a potential for that. However, we don't know at this point enough about what is going to be built there. I mean, if an ammunitions plant is going to be proposed in there, then we wouldn't be requesting it. And so there are a lot of things in the near future that will potentially be occurring here. One is possibly connection with Missoula Water. And the others are when the owners of lots 1, 2, and 3 determine what they want to build, then at that point we'll need to analyze what the needs are for those structures. But
I get that Missoula Water is not far away, and yet that is no guarantee that in the near term they will move. Just looking at other parts of our city in the urban area, I'm like, they've been there and they're not moving. I mean, it might for sure, and that'd be great, but unless they have told you guys they're moving and here's the date, I don't think we should bank on that. So it is
Josh, before you go on, it looked like Bailey had her hand up. Did you want to clarify anything here, Bailey?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that those lots 1, 2, and 3, I think lots 1 and 2 are owned by someone different right now, and lot 3 is actually owned by Mr. Kavanaugh and this other lot owner. So there is some issues with the property ownership as well, and making, lots 1, 2, and 3 would require another property owner to be on board with changing that condition. And Dave, since you mentioned it, as far as like process and things, if this is something that you do want to recommend approval, there would be a number of conditions that would need to be added that we have for water supply system that are kind of standard conditions that I don't have in front of me at the moment, as well as if it were to be approved, it would also require a covenant amendment and a plat amendment to the face of the plat, because this language is on the face of the plat as well, that sprinkler systems are required. So I just want you to be aware of, if that is where we're going, I would definitely recommend that we pick up the approval at a later commission date where I can get you all of those conditions and things like that, et cetera. So just throwing that out there.
Nope, thank you, Bailey. Josh?
So here's a question for Mr. Giordano. So when there is a change of use, I just want to make sure I understand it right. You do have the opportunity to say this change of use must have a different type of water system. Fire
Exactly. Provided we get that information. Oftentimes we see change of occupancy where someone sells a building and it doesn't go through the permitting process. in the rural setting. And it just becomes something else. But if everyone is following the rules and it does go through the proper channels, it does come across our desk as a change of use. And then we review that building or the change of use at that time and make our recommendations.
And Mr. Kelly, you said this is going to be used for storage, right?
The business is Five Valleys Restoration. And so they operate out of that building to take materials to the location where they're restoring a house that's had some damage to it from water or whatever. So they'll be coming and going from that building, using materials that they've stored in the building to do the
So,
essential.
that any of the materials used, let's say, to kill mold or something aren't volatile or exceptionally flammable and potentially dangerous?
I'm certain some of the cleaning chemicals could be. I haven't talked to Matt about whether those will be stored in the building. I would imagine the bulk of the materials would not be volatile, especially if you're talking about mold cleanup and that type of thing. But I don't think we're talking about a lot of volatility, but I don't have specific information on that storage.
John, for the sake of process today, and this is kind of a threshold question, and I don't know where the other commissioners are coming from on this, but would the applicant even be willing to consider the possibility of installing a fire alarm system?
Yes, we certainly are. We've been talking to him about that, and he's been checking into it. Yes.
Bailey, are there any statutory deadlines that we would have to make a decision on this today without the permission of the applicant, or if the commission so chose to continue the public hearing while additional work was being done, is that something we could just do?
Yeah, there's no statutory timeline on this. I would say I was looking at the agenda, because everything would be due today for next week, the June 3rd agenda. I'd probably have to have it go on June 10th would be the earliest that I could get it back to you guys to get all the conditions laid out and in the packet for you to read, because they are kind of some detailed ones as well.
Okay, thanks. Josh, did you have more questions? I might have cut you off there.
Oh, we're good. Thank you.
So Josh or Juanita, what's your pleasure?
My pleasure is to let's talk about this in 2 weeks and give Bailey and John and Pete time to realign, get their ducks in a row.
Josh?
I'm totally fine with that. I like that idea, actually.
Okay, and Bailey, and you might have started with this, but how does this align with because you had a whole list of elements that were essentially out of compliance here, I'm assuming with our subdivision regulations. Although Mr. Giordino made a pretty good case, I thought that there is, if we were to be reviewing the subdivision today, maybe there would have been greater latitude, or we might have done something different by way of conditions than what was approved years ago. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. A lot of my conclusions were based off of the comment from Pete, and so I will have to go back if you're leaning towards approval and change a number of those findings and conclusions in support of them, because right now they're based off of the written comment that we had gotten. That was the decision for a lot of those. So that would be part of what I would bring back to you, or some amended conclusions for you to review and ultimately accept or not accept, and then proposed conditions for the water cistern, as well as the plat adjustment, the face of the plat face of the final plat that would need to be amended, and the covenant language would need to be amended, as well as the condition. And what I would have recommend is that this condition doesn't get struck, like what they were John and PCI was proposing was to strike a lot of this language, and I would leave that language and just put an extra sentence in the condition that says, you know, for only lots 4 and 5, could they do this, rather than striking the whole condition and leaving kind of a no man land for these other 3 lots. Like, well, what about these 3 lots? So that was kind of what my brain was going with originally before we got Pete's original comment that they were in opposition to it. So then we had to kind of change our plan here a little bit. But so that we would bring that back. So actually the 2 weeks would definitely be enough time to bring you kind of these modified things, if that's the way you're wanting to go.
I think that sounds like a really good idea.
Okay.
Good idea, Juan, and thanks, Bailey. Thanks, Nancy.
John, is that enough time for you to work with staff?
That's great. Yes, we're willing to do that.
Pete?
Yes, sir. And I apologize to the commissioners. My comments to Bailey were a bit premature, having had a conversation with Mr. Kavanaugh just later that day or the next day regarding the inclusion of the fire alarm system. So my comments were based solely on what I knew prior to the introduction of the fire alarm system. So yeah, I would think 2 weeks would be enough time for us to talk about and come up with a reasonable solution. Thank you.
Great. So glad you were here today, Jared. Pete.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pete. You were really helpful.
All right, so we'll keep the public hearing open and reconvene on the 10th of June for this item. Thanks so much, Pete. Thanks, John. And that concludes our final public hearing item today. Is there any other business to come before the commission today? Okay, seeing none, we'll be adjourned. Thanks,
Well
everyone.
done, Dave, for
Well done.
keeping it to an hour. Yeah.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.